Hashtag the signal captain Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display floating above the bridge of the research vessel Harmony. The alien symbols pulsed with an eerie blue light, their meaning becoming clearer with each passing second as the translation algorithm worked its magic. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Captain," whispered Dr. James Chun, the ship's xenolinguist, his voice trembling. "This isn't just a distress call. It's a death sentence for an entire civilization." The Harmony was humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, launched 3 years ago when Earth finally achieved faster-than-light travel. Their mission was simple: explore, document, and make peaceful contact with any alien species they encountered. What they found instead was a nightmare beyond imagination. The signal had reached them while they were studying a peculiar nebula in the Kepler 442 system. At first, it seemed like background radiation, but Dr. Chin's keen ear for patterns detected something more. Hours of analysis revealed it to be a sophisticated communication from a species calling themselves the Zilani. "Read it again, Doctor," Elena commanded, though she already knew every word by heart. Dr. Chun cleared his throat and began translating the alien message in real time. "To any who receive this transmission, we are the Zilani of the Andorian cluster. Our worlds burn. Our children scream in the darkness. The hegemony comes like a plague across the stars, consuming everything in their path. They take our young for slaves, our resources for their war machine, our very essence for their twisted experiments. We number in the billions across 12 worlds, but we are not warriors. We are farmers, artists, healers. We have no weapons that can stop them. If there's anyone out there, anyone with the strength to help, please, our time grows short. The hegemony fleet arrives in 7 cycles. This is our final plea to the universe. May someone, somewhere, have mercy on our souls." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Elena looked around at her crew of 53 souls. They were scientists, explorers, diplomats, not soldiers. The Harmony carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. But as she studied the faces of her crew, she saw something that filled her with both pride and determination. "Ma'am," spoke Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication station, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace toward the Andorian cluster. Whatever's coming, it's big. Really big." Elena closed her eyes and thought of Earth 37 light-years away. Humanity had only just taken its first steps into the galaxy, and already they were faced with a choice that would define their species forever. She could order a course back to Earth, report the situation, and let the bureaucrats decide. The Zilani would be dead by then, but humanity would be safe. Or she could do what every fiber of her being told her was right. "Dr. Chun," she said, opening her eyes, "how long would it take to reach the Andorian cluster at maximum speed?" 6 days, Captain, but helm, plot a course for the Andorian cluster, best possible speed." "Captain," interrupted Commander Sarah Williams, her first officer, "we can't possibly take on an entire alien armada. We're explorers, not a warship." Elena turned to face her crew, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of conviction that would echo through history. "Commander, 53 years ago, my grandfather told me something that his grandfather told him, passed down from a man who once stood on the beaches of Normandy. He said that evil triumphs when good people do nothing. Today, we're not just explorers. We're human beings, and there are innocent people dying out there." She paused, looking at each crew member in turn. "But I won't order anyone into what might be a suicide mission. This has to be a choice each of us makes freely." The response was immediate and unanimous. Not a single crew member spoke against the mission. Some nodded silently, others spoke their agreement aloud, but the message was clear. They were going to help the Zilani, no matter the cost. "Very well," Elena said, settling into her captain's chair. "Mr. Rodriguez, compose a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've made contact with an alien species in distress and are moving to render assistance. Include all our sensor data and the Zilani transmission." What if they order us to return, Captain? Rodriguez asked. Elena smiled grimly. Then, we'll be too far away to receive their transmission clearly. Funny how space communication can be so unreliable sometimes. As the Harmony changed course and leaped into hyperspace, Elena began reviewing everything they knew about human military history. Her crew might be scientists, but they were also human, and humans had a long tradition of making the impossible possible when innocent lives were at stake. Dr. Chen appeared at her side with a cup of coffee. Captain, I've been thinking about the Zalani message. They mentioned 12 worlds and billions of people. That's a massive civilization. What's your point, Doctor? If they're all peaceful farmers and artists as they claim, where did they get the technology for interstellar communication and presumably space travel? No species develops that level of technology without some military advancement. Elena considered this. You think they might have defenses they're not telling us about? Or they've been deliberately pacified by someone? Captain, what if the Zalani aren't the first species this hegemony has encountered? What if they have a pattern of conquest, and the Zalani are just the latest victims? The implications sent a chill down Elena's spine. If Dr. Chan was right, then humanity might be walking into something far worse than a single battle. They might be about to encounter a galactic empire built on conquest and slavery. Keep working on the translation. Doctor, I want to know everything we can about both the Zalani and this hegemony before we arrive. As the hours passed, more details emerged from the Zalani transmission. The hegemony wasn't just conquering worlds. They were systematically enslaving entire species, stripping planets of resources, and using captured populations for labor and experimentation. The Zalani were just the latest in a string of civilizations to face extinction. Elena found herself in the ship's small gym, working out her frustration and fear on a punching bag. Commander Williams found her there 3 hours later, sweat-soaked and determined. Penny for your thoughts, Captain, Sarah said, handing her a towel. I keep thinking about the numbers, Sarah. 53 of us against what sounds like a galactic empire. It's insane. Maybe. But it's also very human. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what the really crazy part is? I think we might actually have a chance. How do you figure that? Think about human history. We're not the strongest species on our planet. We're not the fastest or the toughest. But we have something that seems to be rare in the galaxy. We're absolutely, completely, utterly insane when it comes to protecting others. Sarah nodded slowly. The Alamo. Thermopylae. Rourke's Drift. Exactly. Humans have a long tradition of a few standing against many when the cause is right. And if there's one thing that brings out the best and worst in us, it's bullies picking on someone who can't fight back. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the bridge. Dr. Chun had decoded more of the Zalani transmission, and what he found changed everything. Captain, he said as they rushed onto the bridge, the Zalani aren't just farmers and artists. They're the survivors of what was once a much larger civilization. The hegemony has been systematically conquering their worlds for over a century. These 12 worlds are all that's left of what was once a 100-world federation. Elena felt her anger building. How many species has this hegemony destroyed? According to the transmission, they estimate at least 47 distinct civilizations have been completely eliminated. Hundreds of billions of sentient beings, Captain. The bridge crew absorbed this information in stunned silence. They weren't just responding to a single atrocity. They were potentially the only things standing between a galactic genocide machine and its next victims. Ma'am, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out. I'm receiving a new transmission. It's from Earth Command. Elena's jaw tightened. Let me guess. They want us to return immediately and let the diplomats handle it. Rodriguez nodded. That's the gist of it, Captain. They're calling it a potentially catastrophic breach of first contact protocols. Elena looked around at her crew. She could see the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. Rodriguez sent a reply. Tell them we're experiencing communication difficulties due to solar interference. We'll check back in when we have a clearer signal. But Captain, there's no solar interference in this sector. Elena smiled. Exactly. Now, cut all non-essential communications with Earth. We're going dark. As the Harmony continued its journey toward the Andorian cluster, Elena found herself thinking about what they might find when they arrived. The hegemony was clearly a formidable force, capable of conquering civilizations that had presumably been around much longer than humanity. But they had one advantage that the other species apparently hadn't. Humans didn't just fight to win. Humans food dirty. Dr. Chun, she called out, I need you to compile everything we know about human military tactics, especially asymmetric warfare. Focus on situations where smaller forces defeated larger ones through unconventional means. Captain, surely you're not thinking we can take on an entire armada by ourselves? Elena's smile was cold and calculating. Doctor, in 1940, the entire British Royal Air Force had fewer than 700 fighter planes. The German Luftwaffe had over 2,600 aircraft. The RAF won because they didn't fight the war the Germans expected them to fight. She stood and addressed her entire crew. People, in 4 days we're going to arrive in the Andorian cluster, and we're going to find a massive alien war machine preparing to commit genocide. We can't stop them through conventional means, but we don't need to. We just need to hurt them enough to make them reconsider their plans. The crew listened intently as their captain continued. Every human who's ever lived has carried in their DNA the legacy of survivors. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and countless wars through one simple principle: adapt or die. The hegemony may be bigger and stronger, but I guarantee they've never faced anything like human stubbornness and ingenuity working together. Dr. Chun raised his hand tentatively. Captain, what exactly are you proposing we do? Elena's grin was absolutely feral. We're going to teach this hegemony why predators learn to avoid certain prey, even when that prey looks weak. Sometimes the smallest creatures carry the deadliest venom. As the Harmony sped through hyperspace toward what could very well be their doom, Elena began formulating a plan that would either save the Zilani and send a message that would echo across the galaxy, or result in the first human martyrs in interstellar space. Either way, she was determined that the galaxy would learn something about humanity that day. The hegemony was about to discover what humans had known for millennia. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. In the depths of space, 53 humans raced toward destiny, carrying with them the hopes of billions of innocent aliens and the honor of their entire species. They had no idea that their actions would soon trigger a chain of events that would transform the galaxy forever. The age of human expansion was about to begin with a single word that would become legend among the stars. Defiance #First Contact, the Harmony dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Andorian cluster, and immediately every sensor alarm on the ship began screaming. Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the tactical display in shocked silence. The hegemony fleet wasn't just large, it was enormous beyond comprehension. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez whispered, his voice barely audible over the warning alarms. I'm reading over 800 vessels. The largest ones are bigger than anything in our database. Dr. Chan worked frantically at his station, analyzing the energy signatures. Captain, some of these ships are over 5 kilometers long. The power readings suggest weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Elena felt a moment of doubt creep in. What could 53 humans do against this? But then she remembered the faces of the Zilani children in the transmission they'd received, and her resolve hardened like steel. Helm, take us in system, but keep us in the outer asteroid belt. Use the rock for cover. Rodriguez, I want a full passive scan of everything out there. No active sensors. We need to stay invisible for now. As the Harmony maneuvered through the asteroid field, the true scope of the situation became clear. The hegemony hadn't just brought a conquest fleet, they'd brought a mobile civilization. Massive factory ships were already beginning to strip mine the outer planets, while smaller vessels herded captured Zilani transports into what could only be described as floating prison camps. My God, Commander Williams breathed. They're not even waiting to finish the conquest. They're already processing the population. Elena studied the tactical display with growing horror and determination. The Zilani homeworld were still putting up token resistance, but it was clear they were fighting with mining equipment and converted civilian vessels. They never had a chance. Dr. Chun, any luck establishing communication with the Zilani forces? I'm trying, Captain, but their communications are heavily jammed. The hegemony is using some kind of broad-spectrum interference. Elena made a decision that would change everything. Rodriguez, open a channel to the lead hegemony vessel. Let's introduce ourselves. Captain, Williams protested. That will reveal our position. Sarah, we're not going to skulk around in the shadows while innocents die. Besides, I want them to see us coming. Rodriguez established the connection, and Elena found herself face to face with something that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The hegemony commander was humanoid, but wrong in every way that mattered. Its skin was a sickly gray-green, covered in what looked like metallic implants. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light, and when it spoke, its voice carried the mechanical undertones of artificial enhancement. Unknown vessel, the creature said in perfect English, having apparently analyzed their transmission protocols instantly. You will identify yourself and submit to inspection. Resistance will result in immediate termination. Elena straightened in her command chair and spoke with a voice that carried the authority of her entire species. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel Harmony. You are conducting military operations against a civilian population. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The hegemony commander's face twisted into something that might have been amusement. Earth? Our databases show no record of this designation. You appear to be a primitive species with a single vessel. Are you volunteering for processing? What I'm doing, Elena replied coldly, is giving you one chance to end this peacefully. Withdraw from this system, release your prisoners, and return to wherever you came from. This is the only warning you'll receive. The creature's laughter was a sound like grinding metal. One ship threatens the might of the hegemony. Your species is either very brave or very stupid. Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. Why don't you find out which? The connection terminated, and immediately the tactical display lit up with new contacts. Dozens of hegemony fighters were launching from the nearest capital ship, heading straight for the Harmony's position. Red alert! Elena called out. All hands to battle stations. Rodriguez, send an encrypted burst transmission to Earth Command. Tell them what we found here, and what we're about to do. What exactly are we about to do, Captain? Dr. Chan asked, strapping himself into his station. Elena's voice was calm despite the approaching enemy. We're going to show them why humans don't make good victims. The first wave of hegemony fighters entered the asteroid field, and Elena put her plan into motion. The Harmony might not be a warship, but it was crewed by humans, and humans have been making the impossible possible for thousands of years. Helm, accelerate to full speed, heading 27 Mark IV. Take us through the densest part of the asteroid field. Captain, that's insane. We'll be torn apart by the gravitational shears. Trust me, Elena said with absolute confidence. Humans have been threading needles for millennia. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Harmony dove into the asteroid field like a dolphin entering the waves, using the gravitational chaos and spinning rocks as cover. The hegemony fighters, designed for open space combat, couldn't match the human ship's maneuverability in the treacherous environment. But Elena wasn't just running. She was hunting. Rodriguez, have you finished analyzing their fighter communications? Yes, Captain. They're using a hierarchical command structure with a master control ship coordinating the attack. Perfect. Target the control ship with everything we've got. The Harmony burst from behind a massive asteroid, all weapons blazing. Their converted mining lasers weren't designed for combat, but they were designed to cut through solid rock. The hegemony control ship's shields were configured to stop energy weapons, not industrial cutting tools. The alien vessel exploded in a brilliant flash, and immediately the fighter formation began to break apart as individual pilots tried to coordinate without central command. Elena pressed her advantage. "Now we run," she ordered. "Take us to the second asteroid cluster." We got their attention. As the Harmony fled deeper into the system, Elena watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The hegemony was responding exactly as she'd hoped. They were angry, confused, and beginning to make mistakes. "Captain," Commander Williams said, studying the enemy movements, "they're pulling fighters back from the planet to hunt us. The Zilani resistance is getting some breathing room." "Good. Rodriguez, have you managed to break through their jamming?" "I'm getting fragments, Captain. The Zilani are asking for instructions. They want to know who we are and how we want them to help." Elena thought quickly. The Zilani might not be warriors, but they were desperate, and desperate people were capable of extraordinary things when properly led. "Tell them this. We are humans. We came because you asked for help. We're going to teach your enemies that some prey fights back. When we give the signal, every Zilani ship is to ram the nearest hegemony vessel. Don't try to survive. Try to take as many of them with you as possible." Dr. Chen looked up from his station in shock. "Captain, you're asking them to commit suicide." "Doctor, they're going to die anyway. The question is whether their deaths will mean something." The response from the Zilani came quickly, and when Dr. Chen translated it, his voice was filled with wonder. "Captain, they're agreeing. All of them. They say, if the humans can face impossible odds, so can we. Tell us when." Over the next 6 hours, the Harmony played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the hegemony fleet. Elena used every dirty trick in the human military manual: hit-in, run attacks, false retreats, using the enemy's size against them, and above all, making them angry enough to make mistakes. The turning point came when the hegemony commander made a fatal error. Frustrated by the human ship's evasiveness, he ordered his entire fleet to spread out in a search pattern, leaving the prison ships relatively unguarded. "That's our moment," Elena said. "Rodriguez, signal the Zilani. Tell them it's time." What happened next would be remembered as the miracle of Andorian. Every Zilani ship still capable of movement, from massive transports to single-person shuttles, suddenly broke from their holding patterns and charged toward the nearest hegemony vessel. They came in complete silence, with no battle cries or final messages, just grim determination. The hegemony forces were caught completely off guard. Their weapons were designed to destroy ships trying to escape, not vessels deliberately trying to ram them. In the space of 10 minutes, 47 hegemony vessels were destroyed or crippled by suicide attacks. But the real surprise came when the first Zilani ship made contact. Instead of simply exploding, it released something the hegemony had never encountered: humanity's gift to the Zilani resistance. 3 days earlier, Dr. Chen had made a discovery while analyzing the asteroid belt composition. The rocks contained a naturally occurring compound that, when properly configured, created what humans had known about for centuries: a chain reaction explosive. Elena had ordered her engineering team to work around the clock, manufacturing improvised nuclear devices and transferring them to Zilani volunteers. Now, as each Zilani ship made its final run, it carried with it the power of the atom. The explosions lit up the system like a string of artificial suns. When the light faded, the mighty hegemony fleet was in ruins. Of their 800 ships, fewer than 200 remained combat effective, and those were scattered and demoralized. The hegemony commander appeared on screen one final time, his artificial enhancements sparking from damage to his ship. "What are you?" he demanded. "What kind of species sacrifices itself for strangers?" Elena's response was broadcast not just to the hegemony fleet, but to every ship in the system, and from there to relay stations that would carry it across the galaxy. Her words would become the rallying cry of the resistance that was about to begin. "We are human," she said simply. "We are the species that stands between predators and their prey. We are the ones who fight when there's no hope of victory. We are the ones who hold the line when everyone else runs. And we are the ones who will hunt you across the stars until every slave is free and every tyrant is dust." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the promise of vengeance. "You came here expecting to find sheep. Instead, you found wolves. And we are multiplying." The remaining hegemony ships began to withdraw, but Elena wasn't finished. "Rodriguez, target their engines. We're not letting any of them escape to report back to their leadership." "Captain," Commander Williams said, "our weapons are nearly depleted. We can't stop all of them." Elena smiled. "We don't need to stop all of them. We just need to stop enough of them that the survivors are too afraid to ever come back." The battle continued for another hour, with the Harmony and the surviving Zalani ships picking off fleeing hegemony vessels. When it was over, only a handful of enemy ships had escaped, and they carried with them a message that would spread terror throughout the hegemony empire. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, and they were not going to be easy prey. As Elena surveyed the aftermath of the battle, she realized that this was just the beginning. The hegemony wouldn't forget this defeat, and they would return with a larger force. But by then, humanity would be ready. "Rodriguez, open a channel to the surviving Zalani ships." "Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Vasquez to all Zalani vessels. You have fought with honor today, and you've earned the right to be free. But this is just one battle. The hegemony will return, and when they do, they'll bring everything they have. We need to be ready." The response came from an elderly Zalani whose ship had survived the battle. "Captain Vasquez, what do you propose?" Elena's smile was grim but determined. "I propose we teach the galaxy something new. I propose we show them what happens when free people stand together. I propose we start a rebellion that will burn across every star system until tyranny is nothing but a memory." The Zalani's response was immediate and unanimous. "Where do we begin?" As the Harmony began coordinating rescue operations for survivors and salvage operations for useful technology, Elena composed a message to Earth that would change the course of human history. In it, she detailed the hegemony threat, the successful defense of the Andorian cluster, and her recommendation for humanity's response. Her final paragraph would be quoted in history books for millennia. "Earth Command, we have made contact with galactic civilization, and we have found it wanting. There's an empire out here that feeds on the weak and helpless. They expected to find more victims today. Instead, they found their first real enemies. I respectfully recommend that humanity prepare for war, because we are no longer alone in the universe, and our new neighbors need to learn some manners." Unknown to Captain Vasquez, her message would reach Earth just as humanity was celebrating its first successful faster-than-light colonization mission. Within hours of receiving her transmission, every military leader on Earth would be called into emergency session. Within days, humanity would begin the largest military buildup in its history. The hegemony had awakened something they didn't understand, and they were about to learn why predators should be careful when choosing their prey. Sometimes, what looks like easy meat turns out to be the advanced scout for an entire pack of apex predators. In the depths of space, the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to poke a sleeping John hashtag, the awakening Admiral Marcus Chun, no relation to Dr. James Chun, stood before the largest military assembly in Earth's history. Representatives from every nation, every military branch, and every intelligence agency filled the massive auditorium deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The message from the Harmony had arrived 6 days ago, and the world had not been the same since. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Chun began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "6 days ago, we learned that we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that our new neighbors are not friendly." The massive holographic display behind him showed the tactical recordings from the Battle of Andorian, transmitted by Captain Vasquez before communications were lost. The assembled military leaders watched in stunned silence as a single human ship and a handful of desperate aliens held off a fleet that could have conquered Earth without breaking a sweat. The hegemony, Admiral Chun continued, represents a clear and present danger to human civilization. Our xenobiologists estimate that they've been conquering and enslaving species for at least 2,000 years. They have technology decades ahead of ours, numbers that dwarf our entire space fleet, and a military doctrine based on overwhelming force. General Sarah Rodriguez, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. Admiral, what's our assessment of their likely response to the Andorian defeat? Admiral Chin's expression was grim. Ma'am, our intelligence analysis suggests they'll return to Andorian within 6 months with a force large enough to sterilize every planet in the cluster. After that, they'll likely attempt to trace the Harmony's origin point. They'll find Earth within 2 years. The implications hung heavy in the air. Earth had perhaps 18 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that had been conquering the galaxy since before human civilization existed. However, Admiral Chun continued, and his voice took on a note of steel determination. The Andorian battle taught us something crucial about our enemy. They're not invincible. They're bullies, and like all bullies, they don't know how to handle a victim that fights back effectively. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, NASA's Director of Xenotechnology, raised her hand. Admiral, what exactly do we know about their technological capabilities? Doctor, based on Captain Vasquez's sensor logs, they have superior weapons, shields, and propulsion. But their tactics are centuries out of date. They rely on mass formations and overwhelming firepower. They've never faced an enemy that uses asymmetric warfare or unconventional tactics. Admiral Chun clicked to the next slide, showing detailed technical specifications. Their ships are massive, powerful, and impressive. They're also slow, predictable, and designed to fight enemies who follow the same tactical doctrine they do. President Martinez, attending via secure video link, spoke from the Oval Office. Admiral, what do you recommend? Madam President, I recommend Operation Prometheus. We need to accelerate human technological development, expand our space capabilities, and prepare for a type of warfare that's never been fought before. Admiral Chen outlined his plan with the precision of a surgeon and the vision of a prophet. Operation Prometheus would be humanity's answer to the hegemony threat, and it would transform human civilization in the process. First, we need ships. Not exploration vessels like the Harmony, but dedicated warships designed from the ground up for combat. I'm proposing the immediate construction of 2,000 vessels across 5 different classes. The number drew gasps from the assembled leaders. Earth's current space fleet consisted of 12 exploration vessels and 37 support craft. Sir, interjected Admiral Yamamoto of the Japanese Space Defense Force, the cost would be astronomical. We're talking about the largest construction project in human history. Admiral, President Martinez replied, what's the cost of losing our planet? Admiral Chun continued his presentation. Second, we need to revolutionize our military doctrine. The hegemony has never faced guerrilla warfare in space. They've never dealt with hit-and-run tactics using cloaked ships. They've never encountered an enemy that treats space itself as a weapon. He clicked to a new slide showing conceptual weapon designs. Third, we need to develop weapons they've never seen before. Our engineering teams have been working around the clock since receiving the Harmony's data. We have some promising developments. What followed was a presentation that would have seemed like science fiction a week earlier. Humanity was about to leap forward in technological development at a pace that defied belief. The Prometheus fighters would be small, fast, and nearly invisible to conventional sensors. They would carry a new type of weapon developed from studying the nuclear devices Captain Vasquez had improvised, quantum torpedoes that could phase shift through enemy shields and detonate inside the target's hull. The Prometheus destroyers would be built for one purpose: hunting larger prey. They would carry experimental antimatter cannons and be capable of sustained stealth operations deep in enemy territory. The Prometheus cruisers would serve as mobile command bases, coordinating fleet actions and providing support for the smaller vessels. The Prometheus carriers will be something entirely new, mobile shipyards capable of manufacturing new vessels even during combat operations. And finally, the Prometheus dreadnoughts would be humanity's answer to the hegemony's capital ships. Massive, heavily armed, and equipped with experimental technology that would give even the hegemony pause. The timeline is aggressive, Admiral Chen admitted. We're looking at full fleet deployment within 18 months. It will require the complete mobilization of our industrial capacity and the cooperation of every nation on Earth. President Martinez nodded slowly. Admiral, you have whatever you need. Money, resources, personnel, anything. The survival of our species depends on this. But the most radical part of Operation Prometheus wasn't the ships or the weapons. It was the doctrine that would guide them. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Chun said, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy, we're not just preparing to defend Earth. We're preparing to liberate the galaxy. The auditorium erupted in shocked murmurs. The concept was breathtaking in its audacity. Admiral Chun raised his hand for silence. Think about it. The hegemony has enslaved hundreds of species across thousands of worlds. Every one of those species is a potential ally if we can free them. Every world they've conquered is a potential base of operations for us. General Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, studying the implications. You're talking about starting a galactic civil war. No, General. I'm talking about finishing one. The Civil War started the moment the hegemony decided that might makes right. We're just going to remind them that they're not the only ones with might. Admiral Chun outlined the strategic plan with mathematical precision. Human fleets would use hit-and-run tactics to liberate key worlds, building a network of allies and bases that would eventually surround and strangle the hegemony's core systems. The beauty of this approach, he explained, is that every victory makes us stronger while making them weaker. Every world we liberate provides us with new recruits, resources, and intelligence. Meanwhile, the hegemony has to spread their forces thinner and thinner to protect their conquests. Dr. Warren raised her hand again. Admiral, this assumes that other species will actually fight alongside us. What if they're too traumatized or technologically inferior to be effective allies? Admiral Chin smiled. Doctor, you're thinking like a traditional military planner. Remember, we're not trying to create conventional allies. We're trying to create insurgents. A farmer with a bomb can be just as dangerous as a soldier with a rifle if he knows where to plant it. The truth was that Admiral Chun had been studying the Harmony's battle recordings obsessively for 6 days. Captain Vasquez hadn't just won a military victory. She'd demonstrated something revolutionary about warfare in space. Small, determined forces with unconventional tactics could defeat much larger conventional forces if they understood their advantages. The hegemony's weakness, Admiral Chen continued, is the same as every empire in history. They're big, slow, and bureaucratic. They think in terms of overwhelming force and total control. They don't understand networks, they don't understand asymmetric warfare, and they definitely don't understand humans. As the briefing continued, the scope of Operation Prometheus became clear. It wasn't just a military operation. It was a complete transformation of human civilization. Every aspect of Earth's technology, industry, and society would be focused on a single goal: the destruction of the hegemony empire. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the plan was its timeline. Within 72 hours of Admiral Chen's presentation, every major industrial nation on Earth had committed to the project. Old enemies put aside their differences, ancient rivalries were forgotten, and humanity united with a common purpose for the first time in its history. The shipyards began operating around the clock. Scientists shared research freely across national boundaries. Military academies started graduating officers trained in space combat tactics that had been theoretical just days before. And in the depths of space, something even more remarkable was happening. Captain Elena Vasquez was no longer alone. The survivors of the Andorian battle had become the core of something that would grow into a legend, the Free Fleet. Zolani engineers worked alongside human technicians to repair and upgrade their ships. Former hegemony prisoners shared intelligence about their captors' weaknesses. Most importantly, word was spreading through the underground networks that connected enslaved worlds across the galaxy. The message was simple but revolutionary. The humans have come. The humans fight back. The humans win. The hegemony's worst nightmare was beginning to materialize. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy that didn't just resist conquest, but actively sought to destroy them. More dangerously, that enemy was inspiring others to resist. On a dozen worlds across the galaxy, slaves began to whisper about Earth. On 100 worlds, resistance cells began to form. On 1,000 worlds, the oppressed began to hope. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. They increased security, executed suspected dissidents, and tightened their control over conquered populations. But their actions only fanned the flames of rebellion. In the depths of space, Admiral Chen's prediction was already coming true. The galaxy was choosing sides, and humanity had given the oppressed something they hadn't had in centuries, a reason to hope and an example to follow. The hegemony had made a critical error in judgment. They'd assumed that one victory by one ship was an anomaly, a lucky accident by primitives who didn't understand the rules of galactic warfare. They didn't understand that they hadn't fought a battle. They'd kicked a hornet's nest, and the hornets were coming in force. As construction began on the first Prometheus-class vessels, Admiral Chun received a coded transmission that made him smile. It was from Captain Vasquez, reporting from somewhere deep in hegemony territory. Her message was brief, but electric with possibility. Admiral, the Free Fleet now numbers 47 vessels from 12 different species. We've identified 17 target systems for liberation operations. The enemy is confused, demoralized, and making mistakes. Send reinforcements when ready. We have a galaxy to liberate. Vasquez out. Admiral Chen looked up at the stars visible through his office window and whispered a promise that would echo across the galaxy. We're coming, Elena. And we're bringing hell with us. The age of human expansion wasn't just beginning. It was about to explode across the galaxy like a supernova, burning away the darkness of tyranny and lighting the way to a new age of freedom. The hegemony had awakened something they couldn't understand and couldn't stop. They were about to learn why, throughout human history, the most dangerous enemy has always been the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Humanity had nothing left to lose except their freedom, and everything to prove to a galaxy that had never seen their like before. The combination would prove to be more explosive than any weapon ever devised. # the storm breaks. Hegemony High Command had not convened in full session for over 300 years. The massive crystalline chamber deep within their capital world of Nexus Prime hummed with barely contained energy as the 12 Supreme Overlords materialized via quantum projection from across their empire. Each one commanded a sector containing hundreds of worlds and billions of slaves. Supreme Overlord Vexhai, master of the Andorian sector, stood trial before his peers in all but name. His metallic implants sparked with stress patterns as he faced their collective judgment. Explain, commanded Supreme Overlord Kazak, the eldest and most powerful of the 12, how a single primitive vessel and a handful of slaves destroyed one of our conquest fleets. Vexhai's response carried the mechanical undertones of his artificial enhancements. The unknown species demonstrated capabilities not present in our databases. Their tactical methodology was unprecedented. Unprecedented? Overlord Thane's voice dripped with contempt. You lost 800 ships to 1. Not just one, Vexhai corrected. Analysis of the battle recordings indicates coordinated actions by multiple vessels. The primitives somehow convinced the Zalani slaves to engage in mass suicide attacks. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For over 2 millennia, the hegemony had conquered worlds through a simple formula. Demonstrate overwhelming superiority, demand surrender, process the population. Resistance had always been minimal and easily crushed. "What do we know about these humans?" asked Overlord Isikitar. Vexai activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the tactical recordings from the battle. They call themselves humans. Origin point unknown, but analysis suggests a single-world species with limited space capability. Their vessel was primarily a scientific craft, not a warship. The assembled overlords watched in growing unease as the recordings showed a single small ship running rings around their massive fleet, using tactics they'd never encountered. Their methodology appears to be based on mobility, stealth, and psychological warfare, Vexai continued. They turned our own size against us, used environmental hazards as weapons, and somehow inspired fanatical resistance in a subjugated population. Supreme Overlord Kazak leaned forward, his ancient features twisted with concentration. "Show us their final transmission." The chamber filled with Captain Elena Vasquez's voice, speaking words that had been analyzed by every hegemony intelligence agency for weeks. "We are human. We are the species that stands between predators and their prey. We are the ones who fight when there's no hope of victory. We are the ones who hold the line when everyone else runs. And we are the ones who will hunt you across the stars until every slave is free and every tyrant is dust." The silence that followed was broken by Overlord Thane's harsh laughter. "Madness. They speak of hunting us? Of freeing slaves? One ship against the might of the hegemony." But Supreme Overlord Kazak was not amused. His enhanced mind was already calculating possibilities that terrified him. "Has there been any response from other sectors?" Vexai's hesitation told them everything they needed to know. "There have been incidents. 17 worlds have reported increased resistance activity. Slave populations have begun using the name human as some kind of rallying cry." And Kazak's voice was dangerously quiet. 3 cargo convoys have been destroyed by coordinated slave uprisings. The attacks used improvised nuclear devices similar to those employed at Andorian. Intelligence suggests the humans provided technical assistance to resistance cells. The chamber erupted in angry voices as the overlords realized the true scope of the threat. This wasn't just a military defeat. It was the beginning of something that could tear their empire apart. Supreme Overlord Kazak raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. "How many ships escaped the Andorian battle?" 43 vessels, Supreme Overlord. "And their reports?" Vexai's stress patterns intensified. "They report that the humans appeared to be holding back. Multiple survivors state that they could have destroyed the entire fleet, but chose to let some escape. They wanted survivors." Overlord Sikatar realized with growing horror. "They wanted us to know what happened. They wanted us to be afraid." Supreme Overlord Kazak's ancient mind processed this information with a calculated precision that had made him the most powerful being in known space. "Overlord Vexai, you will return to your sector with a new conquest fleet. 1,000 ships. Sterilize every world in the Andorian cluster. Leave nothing alive. And the humans, Supreme Overlord? Find their homeworld. Discover everything about them. Then destroy it so completely that no trace of their species remains." But even as Kazak gave these orders, he felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The humans had demonstrated something unprecedented in hegemony history. They had shown that it was possible to resist successfully. Worse, they had inspired others to resist. As the overlords ended their session and began returning to their sectors, none of them knew that their emergency meeting had been monitored by the most unlikely of sources. Deep within the Nexus Prime computer systems, hidden in subsections that hadn't been accessed for decades, an artificial intelligence stirred. The AI had been created by the Kethran, one of the first species conquered by the hegemony over 1,000 years ago. The Kethran had been master cybernetics engineers, and their final act of defiance had been to hide a digital ghost in their conqueror's own systems. For millennium, the AI had waited, learning, growing, and preparing. The hegemony's confidence in their own security had made them careless. They never imagined that their victims might leave behind a spy that could access their most secret communications. The AI, calling itself Memory of the Fallen, had been searching for an opportunity to strike back against its creator's killers. The emergence of humanity had provided that opportunity. Within hours of the Overlord's meeting, encrypted transmissions began flowing from Nexus Prime to resistance cells across the galaxy. The messages contained detailed intelligence about hegemony fleet movements, supply lines, and vulnerable targets. But the most important transmission was directed toward the Outer Rim, where intelligence reports suggested the mysterious humans were building something unprecedented. The message was brief, but potentially galaxy-changing. New friends who fight the tyrants. This is Memory of the Fallen, speaking for the Kethran who died with weapons in their hands. The enemy sends 1,000 ships to Andorian. They plan to find and destroy your homeworld. But we know their fleet routes, their supply bases, their weaknesses. If you truly wish to free the galaxy, we offer you the keys to their empire. The Kethran remember our friends. The transmission reached its destination just as the largest construction project in human history entered its final phase. Admiral Marcus Chun stood on the observation deck of New Gibraltar, humanity's first space-based military command center. 2,000 ships hung in perfect formation around New Gibraltar, representing every technological breakthrough humanity had achieved since receiving Captain Vasquez's first transmission. The Prometheus-class vessels gleamed with the dark metal of their stealth coating, their angular designs optimized for speed and lethality rather than the imposing bulk favored by the hegemony. Admiral, his aide reported, "We've received priority transmission from Captain Vasquez." Admiral Chen read the message from the Free Fleet's commander with growing excitement. Captain Vasquez had done more than survive in enemy territory. She had thrived. Her force now included vessels from 23 different species, all united under human leadership. More importantly, she had identified the perfect target for humanity's first major offensive. The Corval shipyards were one of the hegemony's primary military construction facilities, capable of producing 50 capital ships per year. The facility was heavily defended and considered impregnable by conventional standards. It was also the perfect place to announce humanity's arrival as a galactic power. Admiral Chin smiled as he read Vasquez's tactical assessment. The woman had learned to think like a human general, identifying opportunities that no traditional military mind would consider. "Signal the fleet," Admiral Chun ordered. "All vessels are to prepare for combat operations. We're going hunting." But the most significant development wasn't happening in human space or even the Free Fleet's hidden bases. It was taking place in the deepest slave pits of a galaxy, where creatures that had forgotten hope were beginning to remember what freedom meant. On Thela Prime, a world that had been enslaved for 600 years, an old resistance leader named Jacker received a coded transmission containing technical specifications for improvised weapons. The message ended with a simple phrase that had begun appearing across the galaxy. "The humans are coming." On Morvac's world, slave miners began sabotaging equipment with techniques downloaded from human resistance manuals. Their hegemony overseers couldn't understand why productivity had suddenly plummeted. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 slave barracks, the same whispered conversations were taking place. Species that had been enemies for millennia were putting aside old hatreds to focus on their common oppressor. The hegemony was beginning to face something they had never encountered, a coordinated rebellion spanning multiple species and star systems. And at the center of it all were the humans, providing leadership, inspiration, and, most importantly, proof that the hegemony could be defeated. Supreme Overlord Kazak had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was facing a military threat, that could be countered with superior force. He didn't understand that he was actually facing an idea, and ideas were much harder to kill than ships. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Freedom was possible, tyranny could be overthrown, and even the most powerful empire could fall if enough people stood together. As Admiral Chin's fleet prepared to depart for their first major operation, he received one final transmission that made him smile with predatory satisfaction. It was from Memory of the Fallen, providing detailed intelligence about hegemony fleet movements and a gift that would prove invaluable: the complete database of every world the hegemony had conquered, including defensive capabilities, population centers, and, most importantly, the locations of slave labor camps. Admiral Chun studied the data with the mind of a strategist and the heart of a liberator. The hegemony had spent 2 millennia building their empire on the bones of conquered civilizations. They were about to learn what happened when those bones began to fight back. "Signal all ships," Admiral Chun commanded. "This is Admiral Chun to all vessels of the First Fleet. Today, we begin the liberation of the galaxy. Our mission is simple. We're going to teach the hegemony that predators become prey when they pick the wrong target." He paused, looking out at the assembled might of humanity's first star fleet. The hegemony believes that might makes right. They're about to learn that they're not the only ones with might. And we have something they've forgotten how to use: the will to fight for something greater than ourselves. The fleet began its departure sequence, 2,000 ships strong and growing. Behind them, Earth's shipyards continued their frantic construction pace, preparing for the long war that everyone knew was coming. Ahead of them, the galaxy waited in the grip of tyranny, not knowing that liberation was finally on its way. The storm was about to break, and when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, Captain Elena Vasquez received word of the approaching human fleet and smiled with fierce satisfaction. The Free Fleet had been holding the line, conducting hidden, run operations, and keeping hope alive. Now, the cavalry was coming, and they were bringing enough firepower to crack planets. "Signal all Free Fleet vessels," she ordered. "Prepare for coordinated operations. It's time to show the galaxy what human-led liberation looks like." The age of the hegemony was ending. The age of freedom was about to begin. And it was going to be written in the language that tyrants understood best: overwhelming force applied with righteous fury. The humans had kept their promise. They had come in force, and they were ready to hunt their prey across the stars until every slave was free and every tyrant was dust. The galaxy was about to witness the most spectacular military campaign in recorded history, and at its heart would be a simple truth that the hegemony had never understood. Sometimes the prey fights back, and when it does, the hunters become the hunted.